Today we've got Anthony Farhat with PGI Homes. We've been talking a little bit already, but just a fantastic man I've gotten to know, and hopefully, going to get to know even more. And pleasure of meeting your wife that is part of the team.
Yeah.
And she does that just pretty much for you guys.
Only for us. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. She actually has a weird background. She has a visual merchandising degree, and her dream was to do storefronts. Like, if you go to New York and you look at Bloomingdale's or Saks and they have these crazy windows that they do, that was what she dreamed of doing when she was younger, is setting up those displays in the storefront. So she got a visual merchandising degree. She worked in Miami for a boutique called A Nose for Clothes, and they had like 7 stores, kind of a high-end boutique. And she did some buying and some other things. And at some point, that's a really weird business, and it's a tough business to make money in.
Yeah.
So she was born in Naples Community Hospital downtown, when they delivered babies there.
Yeah.
Graduated from Naples High, and then came back here, and I met her through a photography studio that did architectural photography, and they also did other type modeling photography and other types of things. And so I met her there and stole her, basically.
Yeah.
And she started working for our firm on sales.
Yeah.
And then she started helping with color outs and all that stuff. So now she does all our houses.
Yeah.
Right? Every cabinet door, every cabinet knob, and all the way now through furniture, rugs, draperies.
Yeah, she does a fantastic job.
Yeah, she's really into it.
Yeah, I've again, all the selections, the tiles, the hard surfaces, all that kind of stuff that you go through from inside and out.
Yeah.
She does a great job. And I mean, again, great team.
Yeah, she's talented.
So PGI Homes was founded in 1979. You've built more than 3,000 custom homes across Southwest Florida between your dad, your brother, and
the Johns family. Yeah.
And the Johns family.
Yep.
And like we said, started more so in Punta Gorda Isles.
Yeah, that's where we started.
So, and now all around Southwest Florida. How far up do you go? Do you go up to Sarasota still?
Not anymore.
Yeah.
We used to. Not anymore. I'm going more south than north.
Yeah.
So I do have, so right now our farthest north project is I bought in not in downtown Punta Gorda, but very close where the Isles Yacht Club is. I bought a parcel across the street, which is on the harbor, kind of facing north towards Fisherman's Village and Sunseeker on the other side of the Charlotte Harbor. And I subdivided it into 6 properties. So there'll be 5 single family houses, and then I have a commercial corner across from the yacht club. So that is I bought that property 5 or 6 years ago and spent time chopping it all up, and all that's done now. And so I'll do 5 units there, but they'll be spec, and that'll be our farthest north that will be. And
those are waterfront homes?
They're on the harbor.
What's the kind of, what's the makeup of those?
Much cheaper than you would see here. So, Punta Gorda is such a good deal. I'll bet you.
And a great town.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
And so these are like walk across the street from the yacht club kind of products.
Okay.
So they're 2-story, relatively narrow sites. So the sites are, what were we? We were 45 wide by 125 deep, but we have relaxed setbacks. So 3-foot side setbacks. So I was able to do 2-story units that are pretty big. I mean, I think we're ranging in price. We did a couple different floor plan variations, and we were like 3,200 to 3,500 of conditioned space, 2-car garage because it's a little narrow, and then I'm calling them a spool. So sort of like a 12 by 14 pool area.
Yeah,
it's tight.
Yeah, spool. I've never heard that.
I mean, it's just it's either a giant hot tub or a really small pool. But
you mind if I take that?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, you can have it. But it'll have, all the things that, to me, it was like right between a condo buyer and a single. Candidly, it was really what I think I would be when I retire, which is, I don't want to be in a condo because I don't want to deal with an elevator. I do want to have a covered garage. I want to have a place to stash bikes. I want to have an outdoor kitchen. I want to have my own hot tub. Like, there's certain things I just don't want to share.
Yeah.
but I also don't want to take care of a 4,000-foot house on a half acre or quarter acre and a yard and the landscape and
Yeah.
all that. So this was a hybrid where I figured, okay, this is kind of condo living with all the benefits of single family. So it'll be fun. It'll be fun to see how the market takes them, if they like them as much as I do.
Yeah.
But if I lived in Punta Gorda, this is where I would live in one of these.
That's where you'd live.
for sure.
Got to see that. So we're doing specs, but we'll do custom homes for people, right?
Yeah.
So, but primarily you're doing the specs and developing them and building them, or no, we do both. And
So right now, I'm probably 60% retail, 40% spec. I think that's shifting. We're doing more specs. The I've always wanted to do specs, right?
Yeah.
The problem is with luxury specs is it's expensive,
yeah,
right? So it takes a while,
yeah,
years and years to sort of build up the capital to be able to do it and do it comfortably where you're not panicking all the time. So that ratio went from 10% to spec to 20 to 30 to 40 today. I would say within a year or two will probably be 80%.
yeah.
I don't know that I'll ever get to 100%, because where we build, we just meet a lot of retail opportunities, and
I think also too, I mean, because like what you were saying, if I was going to live at this time in my life, this is what I would want. You guys do such a great job of that. It's like the one that we've got down the street in Town and River. I mean, it's perfect. There's no wasted space. You did all the right things, and from the inside to the outside, what you would expect or what you would want. And then some things that you wouldn't even think about. And oh my God, this is fantastic. I love this. First time I ever saw an in-ground cold plunge is that home.
It's the
I've
first one I
never
ever
seen
did.
that. Yeah, I've never seen that
Yeah.
before.
Yeah.
I was blown away, and I'm like, going, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
You know, and it just and I think that's, if you know what you're doing, and you know what the consumer, the person might want in a home, and you're giving them something that that's what they want and more. So I think you guys know what you're doing, which is really nice to see.
I think when you hear spec houses, sometimes it sounds very generic, right?
Yeah.
Or unappealing in some way, or very stock.
PGI Homes is renowned for its award-winning team of architects, designers, construction professionals, 380 industry awards, including prestigious Grand Aurora Awards. What's the Grand Aurora Award? What is that?
So the Auroras, I should have brought Tia for this question. The Auroras are Tia's favorite thing. She likes trophies. It's different than the local awards. So you hear somebody says, oh, well, I have whatever, pick your poison, best kitchen or best house or house of the year. That's very, very localized, right? That's like, okay, Lee County has a award ceremony for the builders that participate.
Yeah.
And we actually candidly haven't done a local one of those in probably 15 years.
Yeah.
But the Auroras is 14 states. So it's Maryland, sweeps all the way down through Florida, and then goes over to Texas. So it's the 14 states in the southeastern United States. Super, super talented pool of builders and designers. And you submit there, and there is no participation trophy, right?
Yeah.
So you go all in, and there's, let's say, 20 submittals for a particular category, and one guy wins.
Yeah.
So we sort of appreciate the competitive nature of it.
Yeah.
And that's what the Auroras. Now, we have not done the Auroras the last 2 years because, candidly, we've been so busy. It just hasn't been a priority. The submittals are cumbersome.
Yeah.
Really cumbersome. So, but Tia mentioned it the other day. So I do think we'll probably jump back in. Usually the submittals are in the spring. So it's like Q2. So I think second quarter of 2025, we'll probably throw a couple houses in.
I think that's kind of cool. I mean, people, awards, but that's a big award.
Yeah.
And that's something to be proud of.
That one in particular is special to us.
And a lot of people don't understand what that means. So it's kind of, interesting to, understand 14 states, things like that.
Sure.
and you're putting yourself out there
Mhm.
to
Yeah.
be, looked at, and,
Mhm.
are you a good builder, all that good stuff. And do
Mhm.
you do it right, which you do. With over 3,000 custom built homes, what are some of the most memorable projects? What are some of the most memorable projects you've worked on? That's interesting.
Yeah, that is. So keep in mind, I only came full time in '98, so I'm this. Let's call it the second half of the company era, right? So I
Yeah.
wasn't exposed to a lot of the earlier ones, other than sweeping the slabs, and I wasn't paying attention because I was so young.
Yeah.
I would say one of the more interesting houses was I mentioned that Will Stout bought Cape Harbor,
Yeah.
and he had come off a partnership with my father and Burnstone Marina, and that was interesting. So I remember that drive down, and you remember Cape Harbor probably in 2000. I mean, it wasn't what we see
I
today.
remember when it was the Rose Gardens, right?
Yeah,
Wasn't
I
that where the
mean,
Rose
it
Gardens?
was yeah.
Yeah.
So we come down for lunch with Will, and Will says, "Oh yeah, we're gonna build like multi-million-dollar houses here." And I
Yeah.
mean, it was like it seemed like the most implausible thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Cape Coral.
yeah. So we drive back to Punta Gorda after that lunch, and I remember my father being candid and thinking like this is a pretty audacious goal, right? To put it
Yeah.
politely. Uh, so long and short of it is, Will needed comps, right? In order to be able to sell 2 or 3 or $4 million houses, you have to have
Yeah.
2 or 3 or $4 million houses. And certainly nobody wanted to pioneer that on the customer side. So Will came to the conclusion that some of this had to be speculative in nature. So he convinced my father to build a $3 million house in Cape Coral. Now there had not been a 7-figure comp on the residential side in the history of the city yet.
Yeah.
Like there wasn't $1 million
Yeah.
house, right? Didn't exist. So and we're gonna come to market with 3 million, and the high watermark's probably what 800,000 or something, right? So we built a house called the Biltmore in Cape Harbor Preserve, which is close to the house that Will built for himself, which was
Yeah.
quite a masterpiece. And so Will was building his house. We built that house. And there was a couple other players. They called it Will threw a big party, called it the Magnificent Seven, if my memory serves me correct. And it was Wyman Stokes, who you're probably
Yeah.
familiar
Wyman
with, been
Stokes.
around a while. I think Harborside was there. I think Abishan was there, and a couple other guys.
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly. But so we did the Biltmore. It was a really cool house. I mentioned earlier, I'm not a big Mediterranean guy. It was a heavy Mediterranean house, but it was that good.
That was the style then,
Yeah.
too.
And even if you weren't Mediterranean, like even if you didn't love it, like this was a hard house not to appreciate. It was really good.
Yeah.
My father led the design on all of it. I can't take any credit for it, right?
Yeah.
But I did run a caulk gun once or twice on it. But that house ended up trading. I think we came to market at 3.2, which was obscenely high, and it traded at 2.8 all cash the day before we opened, and that was like a big deal, right?
Yeah.
Because there just hadn't been a comp.
Yeah.
So we were able to set sort of that first big comp in Cape Coral, which so for that reason it was fun, right? It kind of helped shift that tide over, and it gave some justification to what Will's vision was.
Yeah.
And so that
And
was
then now we have
neat.
Cape Harbor. Pretty
Yeah.
impressive over there, too.
Yeah, I don't know that Will gets the credit he deserves for what he did over there.
Yeah.
I think he has a lot to do with. I mean, look, that market was eventually going to go up,
Yeah.
right? So his timing was spectacular, but that was pretty brave.
I never looked at it, and just over the last couple of years, I've started looking at it more because it is a market that I like.
Yeah.
And the high end for us, when I first started, everybody thought about Sanibel, Captiva, Naples, all that, and they didn't think about Fort Myers, and they didn't think about Cape Coral. But
Right.
now, I mean, our skyline along the water and on the river, and the homes and the people that own them and all that. I mean, there's a lot of expensive real estate here
Yeah.
in Southwest Florida, and Cape Harbor and Tarpon. I mean, nice subdivisions, incredible waterfront over there, all the canal systems. I remember taking my boat back there not too long ago, and I was just blown away by all the homes on that waterway, and beautiful homes.
Yeah.
You know,
There's a statistic, I can't remember it now, but it's the lineal footage of seawall, and I'll butcher this, so I hope nobody listening to this believes me certainly, but so with certainty, but I think it's the most I think it's the most lineal footage of seawall of any municipality in the country, if I'm not mistaken. Like
It
I
is.
think it's Italy or something has more than we do as far as a municipal basis or something like
It
that, right?
is. I've heard that before
Yeah,
too.
yeah,
Yeah, we did that on we talked about that on another
yeah.
podcast, I believe. But so any other memorable homes? I know there's a lot of them.
Yeah,
I
there's
mean,
a lot of
Naples, you're
them.
pretty big in Naples anymore, right?
Yeah, we're doing some fun stuff in Naples. I just the house that I love the most, I just completed about a year ago. Um, so I met this couple. It's kind of an interesting story. I met this couple a while ago. They were in the video game business. The husband was, and he was a video game creator, and he wanted to build a house in Tarpon Point. Um, his wife's sister was in Cape Coral, so they had family in Cape Coral. That was the draw.
Mhm.
They were not from Florida, but that the draw to Cape Coral in particular was that. If you are curious why they picked Tarpon, so wanted to build a house. I met with them. Very successful. Apparently, a lot of money in video games.
Yeah.
And but these were like console video games, like the video games that you and I probably grew up with. Like I had Sega Genesis, and
Yeah.
you know, like you had the cartridge games. So
Yeah.
they were that traditional game, right? Xbox or whatever.
Yeah.
And
I think mine was Atari. That's
okay,
before
yeah,
your time.
yeah. I had an Atari. I had an Atari. So anyway, I meet we kind of go down the road for a few months, which is totally normal for us. I mean, we'll know somebody for a year before we actually come to a finalization on a design. And then I get a phone call and he says, "Hey, listen, I'm going to hit the brakes. We're working on this new thing, game related type thing. We're working on this new thing. I don't know if it's going to work out. It may or may not impact the budget, whatever. But I'm basically going to be all in on this project at work. So I can't build a house in Florida." Okay, great, no problem. Like it happens. So I said, "Well, just call me if things change." So he called me back. Probably, God, I bet it was 2 or 3 years later. He calls me back and says, "Okay, like I finished my project, and all's good. I'm ready to start my house project now." Well, it turns out that video game, unbeknownst to me, so we start drawing, and we're drawing a house, and it's a big house, right? And I'm thinking, gosh, this is a huge house for two people, and they have 3 kids, but 2 of their kids were going to be off in college by the time the house got finished. So we designed this house together, and about 6 months in, I realized their video game that they created was Fortnite, right? Which ended
Oh
up,
my
yeah. And so
gosh.
this was a company-wide effort. It
Yeah.
wasn't a singular person,
Yeah.
right? But he was, the company was called Epic, or is called Epic, and this particular guy was one of the critical people as far as creating the atmosphere of the game, right?
Yeah.
Like probably the most creative person I've ever met in my life, let alone done business with or built a house for. Uh, just the nicest people ever, and had amazing taste. It like everything just clicked, right? So, when you're building for the customer, I mean, your job is to make their vision a reality, right? Not your vision. Now
Yeah.
we give them advice and give them suggestions, of course, and try to steer it in a direction that has continuity and will be relevant and,
Yeah.
and attractive. But these people had amazing taste. Like, I mean, I say that because their taste was similar to mine. I think I got pretty good taste. So,
Yeah.
we just clicked. So we built that house in Tarpon. It took a while, probably a 27-month build, I want to say, or 28-month build, which was expected with what we put into this house. And that house is just such a cool house. I mean, it's just something I'm very, very proud of. So as far as personal pride, I'm most proud of that house.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I go into a lot of a lot of build jobs, and I'm blown away by sometimes what someone has built and they didn't think about putting that into the home. Something that the market's gonna want, whoever buys that home next. And I know they're not thinking about resale sometimes, things like that, but it's amazing how some people, I mean, it could be like an elevator for a two-story home, and it's like, doesn't have an elevator or not a place for it at
Yeah.
least.
Yeah.
And then you gotta try to figure out where
Where to put
put it.
Yeah. Retrofitting's not easy with elevators.
Or garages, things
Yeah.
like that. Or I mean, it's just amazing sometimes what I see. And I know some of these can be very personal, and they just don't care.
Yeah.
You know, that's what I want.
I get a
don't
lot
really.
of that. I have a lot of customers
But
where I'll say, "Hey, you need to maybe consider doing this or doing
so
that."
you definitely do that?
Oh, we always encourage it.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they'll say to me, "I'm not building this house for anybody else. I'm building it for me."
Yeah.
And I get it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
but eventually, I mean, eventually it sells, right?
We had one that was like 13,000 square feet, and you would think, and it was under air.
Yeah.
And you would think that, but it was only 3 bedrooms. And I mean,
I think I know that house.
yeah. And we ended up making it a 5-bedroom home,
Yeah.
but you could tell that it had been
Yeah.
remodeled into a 5-bedroom home.
Yeah, sure.
But it just, and it's amazing the people that had come in there, you know, what they wanted and what it offered. We missed out on a lot of buyers because of that.
It's like they didn't care until they did.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. And by the way, I mean, I've built at least 4 or 5. I've got one right now where it's going to sound strange. A family's second last home, right? So
Yeah.
in other words, I built them a home and they said,
This
this
is
is it.
Yeah.
I'm not doing anything else. Like, this is my final home. I'm not building this to resell, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah. And then sure enough, 5 or 6 years later, I get a phone call.
Yeah.
Oh, I know we said this was going to be, but we want to build one more.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, I've done that 5 or 6 times.
Yeah.
I've got one right now in Punta Gorda where I built their quote last house 5 years ago. And now I'm building their second last house. You know?
Now you're not just doing single family homes. Aren't you doing some development too with commercial?
Not commercial. But we do have a commercial corner on that property I mentioned earlier in Punta Gorda. So yeah, we'll buy land and chop it, but nothing large scale.
Yeah.
The property in Punta Gorda was a 12-plex condo, for example, that got damaged in Hurricane Charlie. That's how long ago that thing's been going on. And we ended up acquiring the site. That's a tough thing to do when you have 12 individual owners and I mean, Sanibel's going through it now, right?
Yeah.
So you have 12 individual owners, buildings damaged. What do? Do you scrape it and sell it to a developer, et cetera? So probably that deal went through about 6 years of negotiations. We bought it. And rather than redeveloping it into a 12-plex, we ran the math on it. And it was like, well, if we did 5 single families here, we think we would yield a better return. We also think it would be aesthetically just more attractive.
Yeah.
So we, chopped that into 5 single families. And then we did a commercial, small commercial corner on it. So like small, I would call that relatively small scale development.
Yeah.
I do have a partner that I do some spec product with who has he's an apartment developer nationally, and they have a big apartment. Phase 1 is complete on Immokalee and 951, which that corner's blowing up in East Naples. And T and I did invest in phase 2, which actually I think closes next week. But we will be completely hands off, right?
Yeah.
So we'll be a part of it, and that's a big project. I think it's 380 units or something, but we'll just be an equity member. We won't have any say in the design or anything like that.
Yeah. And that's apartments.
It is, yeah. And now's not, I mean, arguably this is probably the worst time in the last 10 years to go dump money into a ground up apartment deal because of just saturation and rates and cap rates and all that stuff. But I wanted to get a feel for it, and I think there's no better way to sort of understand the business model than to have some skin in the game.
Yeah.
So, ultimately, that's East Naples is blowing up, right? So as long as you have patient money in the deal,
Yeah.
you're not going to lose money on it. I mean, it'll just take time.
Did you hear the other day about with the private airport? They're thinking about moving that.
No, I did.
There's
In
something,
Naples?
yeah. There's something going on with the airport there, and where else could we do? Where else could we put this?
It's interesting. I wonder. So my kids are in high school, so I've got a senior and a sophomore, and my wife and I have talked about, we live on Sanibel. We've talked about, okay, where are we going to be when we're empty nesters, right?
Yeah.
And so I had this desire to be in a walkable environment. Sanibel's actually not that walkable,
No.
right? So
Wish it was.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah. We had that town center at one time that everybody
Yeah.
always talked about.
I think that would have been a great idea.
Oh, yeah.
It's a shame that died, but
Yeah.
there is something to be said for being able to wake up in the morning as a young retiree and like walk to coffee or walk to dinner, or walk to
Yeah.
happy hour, or whatever. And so when you think about where can you do that, you can do it in Punta Gorda, kind of.
Yeah.
You can do it in Sarasota, and you can do it in Naples,
Yeah.
right?
That's what we need more downtown Fort Myers. I mean, Fort Myers has the potential to do it. We just still haven't done, they do that marina downtown, things like that. That could really help turn a corner.
But we went down to Naples and looked at a house in downtown. And I said to her, hey, look, we can rent this out for the next few years, and then we'll tear it down, and then we'll build our empty nester house here.
Yeah.
And we'll kind of try this out, see if we like it.
Yeah.
Walk to Fifth or walk to Third or whatever. And we were at the old Naples pub, and it was the week before Christmas. And so the jet activity is like intense.
Yeah.
Like during, you know what I mean? Like every 3 minutes there's a jet. And it feels like you're going to get sucked into the turbine. They're so close to you.
Yeah.
And so we sat there, and she's like, look, I think this would drive me insane.
Yeah.
And it's amazing because obviously the dollars per foot down there are nuts, right? And at first it's a turnoff, and then somebody said to me, that's the sound of success.
Yeah.
And so it does kind of change your tune on it a little bit, right?
Yeah.
But maybe that's why they're looking at moving it, because it's imposing over the downtown properties.
Oh, very much so. I mean, that's some expensive real estate right there.
Yeah.
Why have it right there?
Right.
So, naturally, I mean, Southwest Florida's growing up.
Mhm.
I mean, a lot of the demographics have changed.
Mhm.
A lot more younger people coming in here to enjoy. I mean, Fort Myers is not a sleepy little town anymore. Naples, all that. Punta Gorda, like we talked about. How has the company evolved over the years, especially with the addition of new generations in the business? More companies moving in. We had Hertz, you got Gardner, you got Chico's,
I think you get a certainly a more cosmopolitan buyer than what we used to get, right?
Yeah.
So I think back when I first started full time, I mean, our buyer was pretty typical, right? It was Midwestern.
Yeah.
Worked at General Motors or Ford, and very conservative, financially conservative, right? Generally, modest, they would live below their means, not above their means. But it was a very like traditionally typical buyer. Now and they're always retired, always, right? I think the youngest house, probably the youngest customer we had was 70.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, I remember building a house in Punta Gorda Isles for a guy that was 48. And it was like, oh my God, I'm building a house for a child.
Yeah.
So certainly our buyer pool is getting younger, way more cosmopolitan, and also wanting probably a little bit more particular too on style.
Yeah.
Right? Like they know what they want. And I think you're seeing some upscale materials, and like the houses are getting more upscale.
Yeah.
Buyers are getting a little bit younger.
Not just Mediterranean, not the ranches.
Same old
You're
thing.
seeing more contemporary, definitely coastal.
And that brings talent, right?
Yeah.
So just think about the designer talent that take our market in the 90s. There wasn't really like a tremendous amount of talented designers either, right? So, the customers that come down and are willing to make the investment for good design and good style, and that brings, I think, talent in. So I think the builder pool is more talented than it was certainly when I first started. The designer pool is way more talented than it was when I first started.
A lot of people used to bring their designers in from other places.
Because you had to.
Yeah. And they still do somewhat, but I see a lot more.
Some of that's just comfort. Right?
Yeah.
They did a house for them and somewhere up north, and they liked it. And, so that's interesting. The other interesting thing is, probably if, the first 3,000 houses we built over 30 or 40 years, we never had a single buyer from California.
Yeah.
And I did a house for a couple from California probably 6 years ago, which was my first time ever doing it. So now like we're starting to get some people that are from out west, which is different. I had never seen that before. I mean, even New York, we didn't see a lot of it. It was sort of like the I-75, I-95 rule, right? Like They go from New York down to Miami, and they go from Michigan down to the West Coast, right?
Yeah, it's still our bread and butter, the
It is.
Midwest.
It
But
is.
again,
We're
like,
getting more Northeast. We're
yeah,
getting a little bit of the West Coast coming in.
yeah. I think that study that statistic I saw the other day, it was like 46% still from the Midwest, and then
Right.
it's Northeast, and then you get into that Texas.
But it
and
used to
then
be
you go-
98%.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
But like you said, California.
Yeah.
You've seen a lot more
Starting in
California.
California.
Yeah.
Well, we're a screaming good deal if you're from California,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
I mean,
Amazing.
yeah.
And just everything we talk about our weather here. I mean, you got weather everywhere. In California, you deal with a lot of different types of weather, whether
Yeah.
it's the fires, whether it's whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's crazy.
I suppose, yeah. I would certainly rather have hurricane exposure than fire exposure.
Yeah. And
Certainly.
even tornadoes.
Yeah.
At least we know it's coming.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and with the new codes, I mean,
that's the thing too, the new codes. I mean, if you look at what Ian did, if you were in the newer codes, then
you were fine.
You were fine.
You were fine. And the FEMA flood zones were spot on. I mean, I'm on Sanibel. I was in an AE 11, which got reduced after Ian to an AE 10.
Yeah.
Appropriately so. And I had a 36-month-old house that we had built, and it had a stem wall, and I mean, it was fine.
Usually with things like with something like with Ian that happened a couple of years now, you usually see some big changes in construction. Do you see anything like that really? Because we were
because those codes worked.
Yeah.
I mean, the codes were so good. I mean, FEMA came in, I think it was November, right after the storm, but they had already, they update their maps every so often, right? So that was already in the queue. Matter of fact, they were late. They were supposed to update it prior to Ian.
Yeah.
So they did level things out. But when you look at what they did, Sanibel had zones that decreased, right? And then when you go upriver, they had zones that increased, which was appropriate because, water finds obviously its low point, and it comes in and out of these barrier islands pretty quickly. But it made no sense that Sanibel had areas that were 14 feet, and then you go upriver and they're at 7 feet.
Yeah.
That water's pushing up just the same.
Yeah.
So they sort of went up a couple feet, more inland or upriver, and then they went down a couple feet on the coastal to balance it.
Yeah.
And I think that's appropriate. I mean, we had water in our garage, of course, which was below flood, but I was in an AE 11, and I'd say the water was probably, even with the splash factor, was probably 2 or 3 feet below my finished floor elevation.
Yeah.
So a tremendous amount of water, the most water we've ever seen, but still below where FEMA had us set.
Yeah.
So if you were new construction and you were at the current FEMA standard, you're okay.
Yeah.
I don't know what more you could do.
Yeah.
I mean, these houses are built just solid.
Well, like you said, you're seeing more things that involved
Right.
FEMA,
Right.
flood. Those were the changes that we've seen.
And the
so
older
far.
homes, right?
Yeah.
The homes that didn't go through. I mean, so we did a round of code changes, I think in 01, which was probably a function of Andrew, right, on the other coast. And then they did a big round of code changes after Charlie. And then those code changes slowly kept coming. But at this point, I mean, if you go submit a permit on Sanibel right now, your engineer's stamping that thing for 185 mile per hour wind, sustained wind resistance. So I mean, that's serious. And you know how the engineers are. They're not stamping it at 185 because they think it's 185. They think it's probably 200, right?
Yeah.
They're putting their stamp on it. So
the days of, I mean, we used to build some luxury homes out of wood, concrete up to the first floor. And then you go, I mean, are those days just pretty much gone or no?
So I've never been a wood guy.
Yeah.
Now I think this is somewhat how you grew up building and what your experience is.
Yeah.
I know if you go to Sanibel, you could probably grab 4 or 5 builders that are passionate that, hey, wood's great. And they're going to tell you.
Still got to meet the codes.
It does. It still has to meet the codes. And they're going to argue, oh, well, it's good because it sort of flexes, right? It's not
Wood
so
gives.
rigid. And that's going to be their argument for it. The reason I don't like wood is because as that wood's flexing, there's certain things that aren't flexing. Like, for example, aluminum extruded window frames aren't flexing.
Yeah.
So when I have something flexing against something rigid, then I'm going to have water intrusion.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm super paranoid about water intrusion. To me, that's just one of those things that no builder wants to deal with, right? It's hard to diagnose, it's hard to solve.
Yeah.
I mean, so we kind of go out of our way on the waterproofing side to just not, I just don't want to deal with it,
Yeah.
right? I don't want those phone calls. I don't want to deal with the fixing it.
Yeah.
So I don't like wood because I think it's slightly more susceptible to water intrusion.
Yeah.
That being said, all these new products, zip board and all this new stuff, and if you wet flash your windows, I think you can really, really, really mitigate it with the new materials. Like, I think you can mitigate a lot of it. But the old houses with house wrap, and I mean, yeah,
Well, like
it's
the house we've got in Town and River, there's no wood on that
no,
at all.
no.
Yeah.
No.
Which is pretty amazing,
Yeah.
but like you said, the new materials, all these materials that you have out there,
Yeah.
and it looks like wood,
Yeah.
like your
Yeah.
ceilings and all that over there. Can you walk us through your full service custom home design and construction process? What can clients expect when they work with PGI Homes?
So I think what's a little unique about us, you have production builders, semi-custom builders, custom builders. Generally speaking, on the production and semi-custom side, they have pre-developed floor plans. You select, well, I want the prototype A and, garage right, garage left, whatever. You have limited flexibility to change the plan. You're going to run into conflicts, right? Somebody's going to make a mistake somewhere. So, architect or draftsman draws a house and, makes a mistake or a typo on masonry window openings, and the windows come out, they don't fit. And it's sort of like you got this awkward finger pointing
mechanical
situation.
things like that
where it's like,
that you
okay,
get
who's going to
into.
pay for this and what's going to happen? Right? So when the same team is doing all of it, it makes it easy for the customer.
Yeah.
Right. It's not like, oh, Mr. Customer, well, this guy did this wrong and I'm the one that's got to fix it. So now you got to pay for it.
Yeah.
It's not like that. Like, if I make a mistake, I pay for it.
Yeah.
So we, on 9 out of 10 of our projects, we draw the house, we build the house, and we do the interior design.
Yeah.
And I think that gives the customer a really smooth experience. Now, of course, the flip side is that customer has to align with our team on taste, right? They shouldn't choose us if they don't think that they like our style.
Yeah.
Right. So I think with most of our customers, they'll look at our previous portfolio work and say, yeah, this is like right up my alley. This is my taste.
Yeah.
And we're a great fit for that.
Yeah.
But I think I mentioned to you earlier, like Mediterranean's not my passion, right? So, and I'm very honest about it. I mean, customer comes in and says, hey, I love old world, Mediterranean, Tuscan, etc. It's like, well, my dad would have been great for you.
Yeah.
But I'm probably not the best guy because it's just not my passion. Not that I can't do it.
Yeah, I'm not a heavy Mediterranean guy whatsoever.
I think your builder should be passionate about the style that you're going for. I mean, I think I could do a great job building a Mediterranean house. I know I can, but I'm not passionate about it, right?
I've seen some of your homes, like the one home in, you get the highest price ever in the dunes.
We did.
On that home.
We did, yeah.
And that was way out of the box.
Yeah.
It was beautiful.
Yeah.
Wasn't even on the water. Wasn't even on the golf course side.
No.
I mean, that was a big sale, a big number.
Yeah, it was.
And then you had the one on the bay that was beautiful too.
Yeah.
I think that was on San Carlos Bay.
San Carlos Bay.
Yeah.
It was a cool house.
So I've been going into some of your homes, even though I didn't know you.
Yeah.
With so many awards and accolades, how do you continue to innovate and push the boundaries of custom home design?
Everything that we do all the time, T and I are thinking about houses, right? So you mentioned the cold plunge at the Town and River house, which was the first one I had done. He said it was the first one he had seen. So I was watching a Tony Robbins documentary on Netflix, and I see him walk out of his backyard and jump into a cold plunge. And I thought, what in the world is that? I didn't even know what it was, right? This was a couple years ago. So I Googled it and I realized what it was, and it was something that he does all the time. And I'm like, okay, that's cool, right?
Have you started doing it?
So I'm like, I got to put that in a house.
Did you do it?
Yeah, that's why I did it at Town and River.
Yeah.
That was the next house in the queue after I saw that Netflix special.
I do it every morning.
Yeah. So But so, I mean, whether we're watching Netflix or we're at a restaurant, I mean, I'm just always looking around the room and thinking, okay, what would be really cool in a luxury house that I'm sort of experiencing right now?
Well, that's also too, the Town and River home is a perfect example of that, because your Netflix series that you like so much is Palm
That's right.
Royale.
That's right.
And that's the inspiration.
That's
there.
right. That's right.
And you even have the picture in the den that pretty much at the breakers,
That's
I think
the
it
breakers.
is. Yeah.
That's the breakers.
Which was really cool. And it makes it so exciting. Every time I go in that home, I'm like, oh man, they did this right.
Yeah.
And that's the you and your wife and the team.
Yeah.
Which is pretty incredible. So I love the way you talk about that as far as when you're building something, what would we want? How would we do this for ourselves and that approach. Also taking, trends and things like that and general things always, but I like the approach that you take when building those. As a multi-generational firm, how do you balance tradition with modern design trends in your projects?
My father's tagline was, God, what was it? This is going back 30 years. Timeless design, enduring value, I think was his tagline for PGI when he had it. Where now we call ourselves the ultimate bespoke builder, so I changed it. But I do think there is something to be said for timeless designs. Like when you build and design the house. So I mean, half of the houses that I build, I'm tearing down a house that was existing prior to me coming onto the site, which seems a little ridiculous.
Yeah.
They don't do that in a lot of other parts of the country. I mean, it's far more rare than it is here. So it sort of begs the question, like, were these, was there some futility in design here, right? So I'm very mindful when we build a house not to be trendy.
Yeah.
Like certainly there are trends that we capture, like you mentioned the Palm Royale. But if you look at the aesthetic in that house, it's actually very old school. Like it's old Palm Beach. That's what we wanted. We wanted it to be old school Palm Beach, which I think is a style that will always be relevant. It'll never go out. Right. So I do think we are always mindful not to be trendy.
Yeah.
I think you can be stylish and not trendy.
Yeah, I think the overall design, the overall feel of your homes, I think is very lasting. There's always going to be cosmetic things and trendy things that people put, selections, whether it's tile or floor, whatever it might be. But that's easy to change out if somebody wanted to in the future.
We're passionate about avoiding it. So for example, there was
like the bathroom in Town and River.
Yeah,
and that's timeless.
Yeah,
that's as timeless as it comes, and it's gorgeous.
Well, and I hope I'm not offending anybody when I say this, but there was a trend that came out where it was traditional porcelain tile that was designed in a wood plank form. And so it was designed to emulate a wood floor, but give you the resilience of porcelain, right? And so that was very popular. We had a string of customers that wanted it. And I did put it in one house, but every single customer, we would sit down and passionately try to talk them out of doing it. Because I'm like, listen, they're going to be ripping this stuff. I mean, it's still got a grout joint. It's still this, it's still that. They're going to be ripping this stuff out of houses. And that's not an easy thing to rip out. It's actually much easier to rip out a countertop, right? Than it is your floor.
Yeah.
So when we see things like that like show themselves as this is probably very, very trendy, right? This is probably going to be not something that's going to be appealing in 10 years. We'll passionately try to convince the customer not to go that route.
Yeah. That's great. Because I don't think a lot of private people do that.
Yeah, that's
and that's again that team of you and Tia, and the rest of your group. What's next for PGI Homes? Are there any upcoming projects or initiatives you're excited about?
Well, I think we're closing on a lot with you next week, right?
Yeah, that's a good.
That's one. Yeah.
Actually, I just talked to a guy that made me an offer that was a lot higher than what you purchased that for.
Okay, well that's good news for me.
He was like, we were talking about the 2 home lot site versus the one.
Yeah.
And either one's going to be fantastic, but he was kind of bummed.
Yeah.
Because he had bought one down the street for, half the size for almost the same price.
Sure.
So I think we got a good deal there.
I think so too.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's a good piece of dirt. I think and I think when you brought it to me, I was completely passionate of, okay, we'll split this and we'll do 2 and da-da-da-da. As I dig in further, that's a good example of more density may not always be better, right? So I do think it'd be great if we're not committed one way or another yet. So I think it'll work either way, but It's not quite the no-brainer that I thought it was. I think we might do the single, and I think that may present better. So we still need to work through that and figure out what the right move is. But
Well, again, I mean, the only reason why you do two, maybe just because, well, there's other things, a lot of things to think about, but maybe the masses and the price range you'd be in for those two versus the one that's going
correct,
to be probably a lot. But we've got a lot of
right,
expensive, bigger homes
right,
that have
yeah,
come on our waterway and continue to be built and all that. So,
absolutely,
those buyers are there.
yeah.
A lot more of them now.
So I'm excited about that. I would like to,
You've got the Punta Gorda Isles one.
yeah, Punta Gorda Isles one. That'll be fun. I've got a couple in downtown Naples that I'm excited about.
Anything on Sanibel and Captiva?
No. So I was gonna. That's what
Because you live out there.
I know.
But I think you said too, I live out there and I'm
Yeah.
enjoying that.
I mean, there is something about. So what I fell in love with when I moved to Sanibel was driving over the bridge.
Yeah.
And it just feels very resortish. And
Yeah.
it's a good way to end your day.
Yeah.
So it's just disconnected enough from the daily grind for me that it was nice to not do business there, even though I did. But all the house, I only built one house out there for a customer.
Yeah.
Every other house I did was either for myself and I ended up selling it or on spec.
Yeah.
So I never built sort of retail houses, I guess I'd say, or custom for a customer. But I would, I would love to build a really cool beach house on Sanibel or Captiva. I haven't yet. We built a project years ago. I don't know if you know Palm Island, but you need a ferry to
Oh,
get
yeah.
there. Okay,
Yeah.
so we did 4 homes out there and had to barge the materials and the whole deal, and that was a difficult logistical challenge, but fun. So I would like to build a cool beach house, something fun, but it's a matter of finding the dirt. I definitely feel like it's sometimes when it's right under your nose, you just miss it. And
Yeah.
there's no doubt. Like I think about the lots that you had, where they took that single family, tore it down, and then
Mediterranean
split
one
it
on-
into 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we were going to split it into 4.
4,
but
right, and then they and went
Yeah.
to 3. And I wanna say you were going to market at like 3.5 or
Yeah.
something,
Yeah.
right? Which seemed like, oh my lord,
Yeah.
this is all the money in the world.
Yeah. Nobody looked at that site like that, really, like I did. And I sold it. And the family that bought it, they never even went out there to see it.
Yeah,
I just presented it to them and they said, sure, let's buy it.
yeah,
And they paid almost $8 million for it.
yeah. Had they gone out there, they might have built themselves a house because it's probably the best piece of real estate on West
Oh.
Gulf, right?
Well, and a lot of people don't understand the coastal control line.
Yeah.
That one's straight across.
Yeah,
Whereas when you put that angle into it.
Yeah.
And, so there's a lot of things that go into the depth from the street, the depth from the beach,
Right.
all that, the high ridge location, all
the
that.
height was awesome.
Yeah.
That was a really good site where I remember looking at them before we met, and I want to say it was 3.5, and I'm thinking, oh man, that's steep, right? And gosh, I mean, we're gonna look back on that and laugh, right? We're already a little bit. I mean, those lots are already worth way more than that today, even after
Yeah.
Ian. But 10 or 15 years from now, those lots will be north of 10, right?
Yeah.
So I do regret a lot of missed purchases along West Gulf on the beach for sure. And
How do you think? What do you think about that? I mean, there's always been this huge disconnect between Naples and Sanibel and the prices. I mean, I know it's a totally different market.
it is.
You've got the shopping down there, you've got the dining down there. There's just so much more to do. But Sanibel and Captiva, it's not like they're making any more of it. And everywhere else is getting more and more traffic. I mean, Sanibel's pretty special. 70% conservation. I mean, it's pretty special. And they've made some changes since Ian with like height,
Sure.
angle of light, that maybe you can get a little bit more ceiling height and
You definitely
and
can.
Yeah. So there's some changes there that are going to really be nice to see in these homes, these future homes that we're going to be building.
Yeah, I think what you're going to see now. I mean, so you had the big problem was there wasn't really land to develop.
Yeah.
Right. And we had talked earlier about the wood construction and the houses having water intrusion and things like that. I mean, they're there wasn't very many houses on Sanibel that if you walked into, you didn't get hit with that musty smell when you walked in. Like
Yeah.
they were taking
Yeah.
on water in some way, and it was almost common, right? It was shockingly common. I think that suppresses comps, right? So
Yeah.
that suppresses your comparable sales value, and so it's hard to like rise when comps are posting at 800 a foot or 1,000 a foot. It's hard to get to. How do you ever get to 2,000?
Yeah.
I think Ian, as terrible as it is, it does open up the door for people to build, you know, big houses,
Yeah.
and build them right and build them to code. And you even see some of the builders out of Naples. I mean, MHK, who's an architect down there, is a really talented guy. He's putting an office on Periwinkle.
Yeah.
A buddy of mine, A. Vernon Allen, who's a Naples guy, is building an office there by Billy's Bike Rental. I think those, you know, seeing that come in is really a good thing. And those guys will put customers in there and houses in there that are going to rival Naples as far as build quality. And
I think that's what we've always been missing.
yeah,
out
and
there.
that'll give you some comps,
Yeah.
right? And so once you see those comps, then I think it kind of crashes through that ceiling.
Yeah.
So I think this cycle you'll see it happen, but I think a big part of the problem was Sanibel's not pro development, right? I mean,
Yeah.
they're just not.
Yeah.
It's almost a dirty word, right?
Yeah.
And I get it. So you had a lot of old houses. A lot of them, you know, just had sort of substandard build quality, and
Yeah.
it kept comps down.
Yeah.
But
our dirt prices, I mean, we've got beachfront lots out there, 2.5 million. I mean, that's
crazy.
It's crazy.
It is.
I mean, I know Sanibel's going through what it's going through, and it's going to be a while, but still.
Yeah, no, it's a deal.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll all look back on it and think, wow, we missed a lot. I'm certain. I don't know that it'll ever. I mean, I think Naples has sort of a
that cachet that
it does,
we'll never
right. They want to be at their cocktail party in Chicago or wherever and say I have a Naples house, right? I mean, so they're buying it for that. I do think there's an element of that for sure that we won't
very much
have.
so.
And I had a couple buddies say to me, which I think is so true. You know, Naples is a place where successful people that are sort of celebrating their success go to show it off, right?
Yeah.
And Naples is a place where successful people go to hide.
Yeah.
So I think that's, you know, true.
Yeah.
I mean, Sanibel's, you know, flip-flops, shorts, successful people that want to hang out with their family and be low key.
But even like Captiva, there's such a difference between Captiva and Sanibel. There's always been.
Yeah.
You know, and it's basically the same island.
Yeah.
You know, Lee County, though, on Captiva, and Sanibel.
More developer friendly.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's why they get a little
and
bit
only
more
so much of it.
Mm-hmm.
There's only so much of it up there.
But I mean, very inconvenient place to get to.
Yeah.
And they trade it more per foot.
Yeah. When I first started out there, and some of the properties that I sold up there and how we chopped them up too, not that I'm proud of chopping up properties, but it was inevitable.
Yeah.
We had a property up on the Tween Stretch, 288 feet. I think we chopped that up in 3 and maybe even almost 4. You know, I had a 44-foot wide. I remember calling the guy and I said, you've got a 44-foot wide. It wasn't even a, it was grandfathered in under it's because you needed 66 feet, but there's 288 feet by it. We chopped that up and I called him up and I said, you can take 66 feet, or I think it was 80 something feet, give 22 to yourself, turn around and sell that remaining 66 back for what you just paid for the whole 80 something feet.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we did.
Sure.
You know, and then the 200 that were left over, you know, we sold those and, you know, flipped those, and it's just pretty amazing to watch all this stuff, you know, and see.
Well, I would argue, I mean, Michigan Homes was on Sanibel and they had a concrete batch plant on the island.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you look at Sanibel, it's weird. The 60s and 70s, those houses are masonry.
Yeah.
And then it goes to wood.
Yeah.
And then the new houses go to concrete.
And those old Michigan homes were well built.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you go in the attic in those.
Form and pour tie beams.
Yeah.
I mean, everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, this is more theoretical than anything else, but my whole thought on it was always that when the batch plant was there, they were building masonry. Masonry trucks are heavy, right?
Yeah.
So they're building masonry. That batch plant shuts down. All of a sudden, everything goes to wood, but we had a drawbridge. So you couldn't bring full-size masonry trucks over that drawbridge. You had to do mini trucks,
Yeah.
right? Which is expensive.
Yeah.
And so I think the reason that wood became so popular was just it was prohibitive from a cost standpoint to do concrete once the concrete wasn't being made on the island. So they just started building everything. So that middle generation of houses, 80s, 90s, 2000, early 2000 was all wood. And then you get the Freesprand Bridge in like whatever, '04, and now you can bring trucks over.
I'd never heard that before.
It's just my theory. I don't know that it's true, but
even making concrete on the island, like you said, I didn't know that.
They did. Yeah, they had a batch plant.
Yeah, where was that at?
I don't know.
Yeah.
But Michigan Homes.
That was Michigan Homes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because Michigan Homes was the developer of the Dunes.
Yeah, Beachview. I think Mariner was the Dunes.
Oh, was Mariner the
Mariner
Dunes?
was
Okay.
the Dunes. Beachview was
Michigan.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Michigan built a bunch of houses in the Dunes. Yeah.
I mean, they built everywhere.
Yeah.
I think they were as far up as Sarasota back in the day.
Yeah. They did a ton.
And they did Naples when Naples wasn't Naples.
Yeah, they were in the 50s, right? They started in the
50s, 60s, and 70s.
Yeah.
You started to see them kind of fade away in the 70s and early 80s. We've been through so much over the last couple years with the storm. Now we're in our next year. We're through the storm season right now. We want to get out of that without any storms. We've got some insurance issues going on. A lot of things going on. Got an election year. What do you see the future of Southwest Florida, after we get through some of these things?
East.
Yeah. Well, we know East.
I think that's probably
infrastructure, like we were talking about out in Babcock Way. I mean, that's going to be a long project. It's going to be pretty congested out there with all the development that's going on out there.
It will be.
So our infrastructure, I mean, we could have a little bit of an infrastructure problem, don't you think, with some of these roads and some of these, I mean, the traffic's not getting any easier.
No, it's not. But I do think it goes out east. And you mentioned Babcock. I mean, if I remember correctly, they didn't even lose power for a minute during Ian.
Yeah.
So I do think that's going to appeal to some people, right?
Yeah.
I toured Miramar Lakes recently, a couple weeks ago. We had gone in there, 25 years ago or whatever, when it was a relatively new concept, and they were putting a builder program together, and we ended up not participating. But I spoke to them recently, and I toured it again. And it's amazing what they've done out there.
Yeah.
Right. Like I really don't go east to 75.
Yeah.
Right?
Off Corkscrew and going all the way to Wild Blue and Camerata out that way.
And the community is gorgeous. Right.
Yeah.
And they have more property that they're going to develop. I think they told me they had like 198 lots left, which surprised the heck out of me. So
have you done some things in Miramar?
I haven't, but we're talking to them right
now.
So we may, but they have a lot going on out there. So I do think, and I mentioned earlier, the project that we invested in on 951 in Mockley, that whole corridor is like blown up. I mean, it's got everything you could ever want there.
You know what we don't have here in Fort Myers, and we've got a little bit of, but they're not that large. I mean, I've got a lot of clients that would like to have more of a luxury condominium, a larger luxury condominium. I guess we just don't have the land for it, but there's definitely a demand for something like that. What do you think about that concept, wellness development? I mean, we've never really seen that too often.
I'm putting a wellness room in a Naples Spec right now, a whole wellness setup, right? So it's like a bathroom with a cold plunge indoors instead of outdoors. Place for like a massage table. Like it's literally like it's a long linear space. So it's only like, I think we were like 10 or 12 feet wide, but we're 20 some feet long, and it's all kind of lined up. So I think people are, clearly going to get more and more health conscious.
I think it's something that maybe you could put into some of your homes a little bit more, that I think people would like it.
Yeah.
Not that they don't want to go to a spa or they don't want to go to a workout place, but, just in your own home, I think I agree. More and more people that would like to see that.
Yeah, I agree.
Got to have the property to do it with too.
Yeah.
I do appreciate meeting you. I'm not BS. And like I said, I find you a very interesting man. Hopefully friends, and growing that and doing business together. I know you do business with a lot of people, and I'm just thankful for the opportunity to represent you, and also get to know you, because I think you're extremely intelligent. I think you know what you're doing. Tia is fantastic at the design. I was blown away. And like you said, there's a lot of good designers here in Southwest Florida. She's fantastic.
Yeah, she's talented.
You know, you guys make a great team and you're young. Hopefully you don't retire anytime soon. I appreciate you coming in today and just talking because I think, you're in our community. You could have left Sanibel and Captiva, but you decided to stay because you love that community.
Yeah.
And I think that speaks volume for you because there are a lot of people that did decide to leave, and there's still a lot of people that are staying too. But your commitment to Southwest Florida, how long it's been, your dad, your brother, your family, you and Tia now. So don't retire. I
Yeah,
think that
thank you.
the future is extremely bright for you. I know, and I'm looking forward to seeing what else you do here.
Well, thank you.
Because I don't think it's just 12 and 15 homes. I hope it's more than that. I hope it's a development that's bringing some really exciting, something really exciting to Southwest Florida. We got a lot of great developers here. A lot of the bigger developers like Lennar and DR Horton, but I'm just excited to see someone like yourself maybe do something like that too. Might not be to that scale, but something that I think that there's people that are looking for that, the kind of quality and what you bring, and the thought behind it. Because I know that I see that in your homes.
Well, thank you. That's flattering.